All right, Stephanie, I like to frame who you are, then we'll get into the meat of the discussion. And it's such a simple question, but usually has a great answer. So how did you accidentally fall into franchising? What's your franchise backstory?
Well, I really didn't accidentally fall into it. I worked for large franchise companies for 15 years before I went to law school. And I had a really good mentor and friend who I worked with in the restaurant business. And he introduced me to some franchise law attorneys while I was still in law school. And it just evolved from there, from networking, and it just, kismet or divine intervention, whatever you want to call it. And I ended up at a small law firm, a boutique law firm in franchising, and just kind of went from there.
When you reflect back on that pathway, and part of what I like to break down is if I'm a candidate out in the world, not even at a place where I've even looked into franchising, but I'm looking into business opportunities, and I have to somehow figure out what franchising is. If you navigate backwards in your career, how long did it take you before you really felt like you had a good grip on how franchising worked?
I probably, gosh, that's a hard one. I could say 5 years, but probably 10. But I know certainly by the time I went to law school, I had 15 years, and I did truly feel like an expert, if there is such a thing. I always, again, worked for large franchisors, but always worked with franchisees. I was typically a liaison, whether it was in operations or training or HR. So I always had that connection to both sides. So I always got to see both sides of the issues, both sides of the impact.
I was talking to a franchise broker recently. And I said, what do you think trips up a franchise buyer in the process? And she said, obviously, there's this big FDD document that gets handed to them, and they're like, "Oh, what is this?" And then they're like, "Hey, you got to sign this receipt page," and they're like, "I'm not signing anything." But it's like, I think that's part of the gap, and obviously, you've had the benefit of having the lens on both protecting the franchisee and protecting the franchisor, which I would imagine, as we get into it, gives an advantage to Children's Lighthouse, because that's how you've engineered the legality side of it.
Right.
But it can be intimidating to a franchisee when it probably shouldn't be. If someone's out there looking at franchising, what would you advise them on how they can get over some of these hurdles that they may face?
Oh, just the FDD is designed, it's supposed to be a plain language document that tells the potential franchisee, look, you got this legal contract with the franchisor called the franchise agreement. But these 20 items in this franchise disclosure document will take you through that document in a way that's not a lot of legal jargon and not a lot of legal ease. So the first thing would be to actually try to read the FDD, understanding that if you have a document, literally some systems this thick, which I know people don't print paper anymore, but if you did, it'd be that thick. They could be 350 pages. If you boil it down to what the plain language portion is, it's probably only about 20 pages.
Right.
It's not that much. So, people really should read it so then they can ask the questions, because if you are talking to a franchisor who truly cares about his franchisees and truly tries to do the right things for the franchisees in the system, they will want you to ask questions, and they will be happy to answer those questions because they want you to come into it with eyes wide open.
I love that advice. I was talking to a franchise candidate, a group of candidates a week ago, and they were kind of stalled out in their process. And I got on a call with them. I am not a franchise sales expert. I'm just more so me. I got on. I said, look, here are the hurdles that you're going to have to overcome in this brand in order to feel comfortable. And then I was like, don't buy a multi-pack. Buy one. Make sure that it's working, but with the mindset of you're going to become a multi-unit operator. And so I talked with them just as humans, and all of a sudden it took a candidate that was borderline dead and moved them into a positive outcome. I think that's part of like the communication of what happens around these documents and saying like, yes, it could kill many trees if we figure this out. But if we boil it down, there's a few key things in here, and here's how it works. If you get that feedback from the franchisor, then obviously if everything else lines up, financial, right market, etc., at least you're working with a franchisor
Right.
that cares about you enough to not sell you on why you need to buy something.
Right. No, I mean, I think that's right. And again, we want franchisees who are educated, because I don't want them to be afraid to ask a question, because the last thing I want is for someone to come into the system and the minute they come in, they're confused, or this isn't what I thought I was doing, or this is what I thought I was getting into. It's like, well, no one wants that. It's, I used to tell franchise prospects, I don't so much anymore. It's like, there's a reason it's called franchise relationships. Like, there are actually franchise relationship laws, and that's what they're called, relationship laws. And the reason that is such a highly used word in franchising is because it truly is a relationship. It's a business relationship. It's not personal, but it is a relationship. There are ups, there are downs, there are communication breakdowns, there are communication challenges, and then there are hopefully open roads of communication. And both sides need to listen, and both sides need to hear, and both sides sometimes need to give and do things that they wouldn't necessarily want to do, because it's a relationship like any other you have in your life.
What I love about that answer, and I want to connect this back to a legal connection, but if I think about you said franchise relationship, there are franchisors that say, no, it's our way or no way. And then there's franchisors that say, let's be in this together. I've gotten to know you and the company a bit this year, and I know that you're on the other side of that. Like, it's about a relationship. The word family gets used. But sometimes when you're looking at these big documents on a legal standpoint, it's like, well, but this seems so large, like it's large on the brain. How do you start breaking into building a relationship with the candidate to help them feel comfortable when there's these big documents that, yes, we're going to have to iron things out to make sure we have alignment on legal standpoint, but understand me, Stephanie, I'm here to actually add more support to the model. Like, how do you navigate that water?
Well, I really personally don't. I'm not going to mislead you. I mean, I think it really starts with our sales process with Matt, and how we handle, we introduce names to faces throughout the process. So, there's the brand presentation call. I get to talk to Colin. There's the operations call with Shelly. So, we try to introduce prospective franchisees to people so that they can start building those conversations and relationships, so that the document itself really isn't that big of a thing. But when it gets down to the end, if there are some questions, or maybe some franchisees want to negotiate some things, and at that point it's like, well, no, we don't negotiate that. But again, it's just, to me, about having a respectful conversation. And go, I hear of franchise systems large franchise systems with high investments who don't even do in-person discovery days anymore. They don't do anything in person. And I'm a very much an in-person person. I'm old enough where that's my background. It was much more effective. Get your tail out of your chair, go around the corner, go talk to somebody. And so I very much believe in that. I think it goes a long way. So I don't even understand how those things happen. But I just, as you can tell from my style from when we first met, I'm just very direct and open and pretty transparent. So there's just really nothing I'm not able to discuss with you, willing to discuss with you, and I'll be transparent. And sometimes it is like, yeah, no, we just, look, we cannot do it that way, or here's why this says this in the agreement. But I always explain the why. That is our big thing around here. When I first came here, a little over 5 years ago, we didn't have whys behind some of the things we did. And that was one of the things. It's like, you guys, if we're going to talk to franchisees about doing things a certain way, then we do need to listen to why they don't want to do it. But then if we're pretty firm that this is how it needs to be, then we've got to be able to tell them why. And it can't just be because I said so. It's there needs to be a true business rationale underneath it. And everything in the franchise agreement can be explained and discussed in that way. And in the item, the 20 items in the FDD, there is a reason why all of it's in there.
A few things I want to unpack from what you just said, because I think it's important. If I'm a candidate out here and I'm curious on your opinion, if I go, nah, I don't really have any questions about the FDD, it almost sounds like they might be disqualifying themselves as a franchisee because the curiosity ends up being such an important ingredient of franchisee. Is that an accurate statement? Like, if you don't put in the investment of time to understand what you're going to get into, and it is very similar to marriage, you can't just quit tomorrow once you get in here.
Right.
If there's a lack of curiosity of the candidate, does that end up being a qualify them out?
I've never encountered that, so I don't know. I don't know. We probably wouldn't be an automatic out, but it would probably say, okay, we need to now go do our own. We need to go do a little more due diligence on our side to see, okay, are there really questions? Are they just afraid to ask them? Are they hidden? Or to your point, it's like, I don't think they're really that invested. I mean, I'll take that back. We did have someone earlier this year, and you could just tell from their demeanor. It was a spouse situation where one spouse was highly engaged, asking all the questions, but the one who was going to run the business really wasn't. It's like, are they on the same page with this? Are we sure this is what they really want to do? So it can be a red flag. Or a yellow flag, right?
Yeah.
A yellow flag.
Well, I mean, that's where like the read on the relationship ends up being so critical to this. And I think to your point of there are large franchisors that don't even do discovery days. I think that's partly because they sell franchises. They don't develop relationships and develop franchisees. And it's hard because there's no real data out there in the marketplace that which I would love to see it. Like, franchisors that develop candidates into their system and then onboard them properly and give them support, this is what they are worth as a candidate versus candidates that are sold in, no relationship, go open up your unit and just go, this is what they're worth. And it's probably very simple math if the data was there to say, like, when you actually put in the time to cultivating a relationship, it should turn into a higher value, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've obviously looked at a lot of franchise brands across your career. What makes Children's Lighthouse special?
I think, honestly, you've seen our core values of, passion, integrity, and excellence. Not necessarily that. Actually, the order is integrity, passion, excellence. So, and I know those get used a lot in companies, but to me, what makes this company different and special is that we truly live by those. I mean, we do. Integrity is just, if you don't have integrity, you cannot be here. You cannot. And because with integrity comes so many other things, right? Then you do have respect for others. You have respect for other people's feelings. You have respect for their ideas. You respect their goals. So then you, in turn, want to support those goals. And that goes to franchisees, not just employees in the company. And then I think, we've talked to you quite a bit about the Brown family. They are a special family. They really are a special family. And I said many years ago, I never ever want to work for a family-owned company. And up until now, I never had. All three franchisors that I worked for were publicly held companies. The small law firm was, I guess, but it was a small, and then I went to one of the largest law firms in the world. So I had truly never done that until I came here. But it is a family atmosphere. Again, we all love each other. We all respect each other. A lot of that spills over into the franchise community, but it's a special family where their word is their bond. We have that in one of our videos about the founders, and it's true. It's just true. We do what we say, and we say what we do. And if by chance there's a hiccup in that whole mantra or that, then we fix it. We fix it. And I never come to work wondering, what on earth is Michael Brown going to do today? Or what on earth is Michael Brown going to say today, or ask me to do, or there's just none of that chaos, right? There's no chaos. There's no insecurity. There's just no uncertainty. And that just to me comes from that family.
I think it's everything you just said. If there's someone watching this, you just nailed it. Because it's hard to read that on a PR release. It's hard to read it in some magazine. It's hard to see it on a website, to hear what you just said. Because I think there's a few things. You just spoke truly about integrity and what I think the definition is, and the way that you approach or that you feel the business approaches franchisees, and they approach you as a part of their teammates. I've always felt like there are brands that come on, like the self-serve frozen yogurt brands. Like those were brands that popped up and people were like gripping at it because it was like, oh, this is cool and new, and integrity and culture didn't matter. The brands that stick around for a long time and continue to do the right things, you see the infrastructure grow around it. And everything you just said, if someone listens to it and they can find it on their own and discover it, it's what will push someone over the edge. Out of curiosity, if you go back to your interviewing to join this, and in your head you're like, I will never join a family business, so maybe you're just doing it, taking the interview because. Do you know the turn moment where you're like, this is where I belong?
Well, and so I had actually then changed. So that had always been my philosophy years ago. But so I don't know. I can't remember. I don't know if Michael Brown is watching this or will see this. And I recently admitted this to someone, but I don't know if he knows it. So, his uncle. So one of the founders, Pat Brown, is Michael's uncle. And Pat was very involved in the business when I started working with Children's Lighthouse. And Pat and I had a very good working relationship. And Pat and I were actually the two people who first started talking about my coming on board. What Pat did not know, and Michael may now not know, is I actually targeted Children's Lighthouse as a company that I would want to transition to. So I was their outside franchise counsel starting in 2011. And I knew that at some point in my career, as I got older, I was going to want to leave private practice and go in-house. But picking the right company was a huge, huge, huge deal for me. I'd seen so many people make that move that didn't work out. I'd seen so many people make that move where then private equity came in and purchased, and 3 years later they were gone. And I just, all those situations made me very, very nervous. So I targeted Children's Lighthouse early on because again, I just saw the integrity and how they ran their business. Then we were involved in some litigation. And during litigation, you find out a lot of things about a client, and never at one time was any evidence discovered or brought to light that was contradictory to what I had been told. So in other words, Children's Lighthouse always did what it said it was going to do, and there was no evidence to the contrary, and it didn't do what it said it didn't do. And so again, they gave me so much assurance. So Pat first approached me. I had just moved over to a bigger law firm and had not been there very long when he first approached me. And at that point, I just wasn't ready. And so I knew I knew I was going to be ready. I just knew from working with this over time that that's just what I wanted to do. And so finally, the 2015 was the magic time.
I have a statement on it, and obviously it's going to be unique to you, but what an interesting insight when you're in looking at a legal situation from the inside, and everything in your gut and your heart and your head say they're telling the truth.
Yeah.
Versus like, and it's because of client attorney privileges, a lot of candidates are never going to have that inside
Right.
view, but it's like, what an interesting validator to say, like,
Right.
wow, they are the stand-up people that we want. Because, like, again, I keep on going back to this, but you buy from people a franchise. The widget that you guys are in is a beautiful widget. It's a great business, check mark. But then beyond it, you have to get to the intangibles when you're talking about a larger investment, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the intangibles that are impossible to see. You either have to listen to the words that get spoken on something like this, or you have to experience it for yourself. And you are experiencing it for yourself the same way a candidate is,
Right.
to try to figure out, like, where is a place that I want to go. And you said something like, private equity comes in, or I've seen it now work out. And you're talking about the employee side, but the same is true on the franchisee side.
True.
And some of those things have to be check marks that they go through in the process of deciding whether a brand is right for them too.
True. No, that's a good point. Yeah.
So let's close with this, and it's a vision for the future, but it's more so your vision for the future. You've been at the company for a long time. How excited are you about the things that are coming to fruition right now?
Oh my goodness. Yes, obviously I won't say I'm very excited, but I really am. I mean, we just previewed a video yesterday that you guys helped us produce. And one of the franchisees talked about how Children's Lighthouse Franchise Company is always evolving and reinventing itself. And, that was a moment of pride, because he doesn't even know the half of the reinvention and that we do. And so what is really inspiring about our team is everyone on the team is constantly looking for processes and platforms and things that will help the franchisee, help the business grow, make everyone's life easier. And that's just exciting to me, that we just continue to elevate the brand, and we elevate the look of the brand. We elevate the product that we are providing, and that is, safe educational childcare. We elevate that. We're always looking at ways to elevate our relationships. I mean, I'm not going to tell you we have perfect relationships with all franchisees, because people are people, but we're always looking at ways to elevate that. Elevate how we can reach out to prospective franchisees. So those are the things that are exciting to me, to know that we've got a good pipeline of development, to know that, we've got more schools coming. We are entering into new markets we've never been in for the first time this year, and that's growing. So it's just a lot of things like that are very exciting to me.
Well, what I appreciate about this conversation and every other conversation that we've had is, if I had to pick a word to describe you and the way that you talk, it's authentic. And I don't know that there's a ton of that in franchising. It's really hard to find it sometimes, because, and part of it is, fake sales goals, or things that have to work with franchisees, or undercapitalized businesses. And so the component that you bring to the table, I think, is deeply valuable. And to someone that happens to watch this from the outside, I hope they can see what I see, because authentic is how I would describe you and the way that you talk. And I appreciate you giving me some of your time to tell some of your story.
Well, you are welcome. And I appreciate your wanting to talk to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For Stephanie, I'm Nick. This was another Franchisor Hot Seat.